One hates to ask about law enforcement when it doesn't work. In Loudoun, we've been following the case of Arnold Mencia Morales, an undocumented worker who was in this country illegally. Mencia Morales has been convicted of rape, and he's been accused of another rape after several prior arrests and convictions in Loudoun, Clark, and Greene counties. From an Attorney General perspective, what loopholes need to be closed to ensure that those undocumented workers who are convicted of a violent crime are actually deported from the country?
You know, this is one of the areas that I've been talking about it since the first day I announced and it's something I'm going to focus on as Attorney General. And what I call this is focusing on what we call criminal illegal immigration. This is a subset of the much bigger problem of illegal immigration here in the state of Virginia and throughout the country. But we're focusing on these folks who are illegally violating the law in other ways, whether it be a DUI or breaking and entering or a more violent act. And what we have to be able to do is have task forces in the local sheriff's office so that when these individuals come in, their status can be reviewed, and if they are here illegally, a federal detainer has to be put on them. And it has to be monitored so that when they're done with their state time, whether it be 6 months for B&E or whatever, that they then are held, transferred to a federal facility, and deported. It serves two purposes. Number one, it deals with this particular individual, and I think you may have seen this in the Morales case. That individual should have been deported after first offense. But it also has a deterrent effect on others who are illegally not to violate the law, because the punishment will be not in addition to their time, but they'll also be deported. And so as Attorney General, I'm going to work with state, local, and federal law enforcement to make sure that we have better coordination within these local communities so that that can be done on a more routine basis. These systems are made up of human beings. Human beings will make mistakes. But it's also incumbent upon leaders like the Attorney General, like the United States Attorney, to make sure that we have better coordination. Because I was U.S. Attorney and worked with the federal authorities, I believe, again, I'm uniquely suited to make sure it happens. What happened in the Morales case is a horrific tragedy. Someone who's been subjected to that kind of violent crime, we can never make her whole again. We can never turn the clock back. We can never ensure that she'll sleep soundly again. We just can't do that. But what we can do is ensure that we have systems in place so the likelihood of it happening again is greatly reduced. And it's one of the reasons why I'm running. People ask me, Mr. Brownlee, why are you running for Attorney General? I've dedicated my entire professional life to chasing down the guys and trying to do justice to victims of crimes when these horrific things happen. And that's why I am running. It is what drives me. It's why I believe the President made me U.S. Attorney. It's why I went to the streets of Washington, D.C. to learn how to be a prosecutor. I just bet we have an obligation to have a safer society. And I am prepared to step forward as Attorney General, do everything in my power to make sure that happens.
One of the defining issues in this campaign has been the proposed repeal of the Triggerman rule. Can you explain to us what the Triggerman rule is and your position on it?
Sure. The Triggerman rule is an anti-justice rule. That's what it is. And essentially what it says is that only the person, the criminal defendant who literally pulls the trigger or plunges in the knife, can be held accountable for capital murder in the state of Virginia. So the scenario that I have said before is, let's say an individual will go to the bank. It's my plan. I scout out the bank. I design the plan. I buy I load the guns. I get the bags. I get the masks. I pick this individual up. We drive to the bank. Inside the bank, I give direction. And then when we're robbing, I tell this other person, I want to kill the teller. And he does. Under the law of Virginia, that individual can be held accountable for capital murder, but not me. And so it's an anti-justice rule. Clearly, under that scenario, culpability for that crime, for that murder, is at least equal to or surpasses that of the other individual. And prosecutors should be empowered with the correct statute so that they can make the necessary judgments to find this. Well, we've tried to abolish the Triggerman rule, and we have time and time again. But Governor Kane, who is opposed to the death penalty, always vetoes the bill. We tried to override the veto. Last year, every single Republican in the House and every single Republican in the Senate, except Cuccinelli, voted to override that. Mr. Cuccinelli was the only Republican politician within the state of Virginia to vote with Tim Kaine on this important criminal justice issue. He is far outside the mainstream on this issue. And I believe his credibility on it was even further weakened when he was asked about it, and his comments were that we do enough killing in Virginia. My view is that this is not killing. This is justice for some of the most violent people in our society, and that prosecutors need to have the tools, the appropriate tools, to find and seek justice. And so it has become an issue. Governor Kane has just recently vetoed again. Senator Cuccinelli will have an opportunity now to change his vote, to step forward, stand with victims of crime, stand with members of law enforcement, and do the right thing, which is trust prosecutors, trust law enforcement so that they can go out and seek justice. And so I hope he'll reconsider. I have asked him to. The Virginia Chiefs of Police have asked the legislators to override this. The sheriffs have, the prosecutors have. And so I hope that he'll reconsider his position, particularly in light of the fact that he has never served as a prosecutor. And so I believe his credibility on this is pretty thin, and I hope he'll reconsider and support law enforcement and support the victims of these violent acts.
A new phenomenon in law enforcement and in the schools is sexting. Teens sending lewd or suggestive photos either by email or via text message. Without going into particular on the case that faced Loudoun, what do you think the relationship should be between law enforcement and the schools in working to combat this new problem?
Right. You know, what we've done is we've established statutes to deal with traditional production, distribution, and possession of child pornography. Child pornography is one of the most horrific things we have in this society, because not only does it harm the child at the time it's created, but it continues to harm the child every time it's viewed. Every time someone views child pornography, that child is once again harmed and hurt and violated. And so that's why we have such stiff penalties against those who produce it and possess it and distribute it. This sexting, as it's called, is something that is new. Technology has really allowed it. You have young people primarily who are photographing their friends or themselves and then sending it. And by strict definition of that statute, it certainly could be viewed under those statutes. My sense is the General Assembly is going to need to take a look at this and see if we can't find additional statutes that provide the appropriate punishment and deal with it in a way we want to deter the conduct. We certainly don't want to encourage this. It's wrong for them to do it. And I think that the General Assembly needs to look at this new as technology develops. They're going to have to make sure that our criminal statutes and civil penalties are also advancing as well.
You served 2 terms as United States Attorney. Can you tell us about the decision to run for the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Sure. Well, I had served just about 2 terms for President Bush. I was appointed in August of '01, so I was one of the first U.S. attorneys appointed in the country. I had done it just about 7 years. I loved it. It was a fantastic opportunity, and I'll always be grateful to George Allen and John Warner and John Ashcroft and, of course, the President for allowing me to serve. But I knew that my term was coming to an end. It is traditional that you only serve 2 terms. And I believe that my time as a public servant just wasn't quite done yet. So my wife and I, we discussed it. I looked at the field of Republicans who were running for Attorney General. There were no prosecutors. There were no veterans. And I think it's important that we have that represented. I love the Republican Party. I'm very proud and have been all my life. And so I decided that I would step forward last May and run for this post. And it has been fantastic. I've crisscrossed the state dozens and dozens of times. I've met wonderful people. I've gotten to debate folks, talk about issues that are important to the Attorney General and the people of this great Commonwealth. And so we've got less than 2 months before our convention. And we have, I believe, offered the Republican Party an opportunity to not only win, but to nominate a candidate who has dedicated his entire professional life to protecting the public, which is exactly the duty of Attorney General. So we're very optimistic. I'm so pleased that we're here, that we've missed, and so we feel good about our chances.
Each Attorney General brings a special style and signature to the Attorney General's office. What do you feel would be your signature issue, or what issues do you feel haven't received adequate attention up until now?
Well, I think the initial signature issue is going to be gang violence and the violence that stems from narcotics trafficking. You've seen that here in your own community, this spike in violence, people being gunned down in the streets or abducted from their homes. And so dealing with law enforcement providing that strong leadership for Virginia's law enforcement community to deal with those issues is going to be very, very important when I'm Attorney General. I know these members of law enforcement, and they know me. Indeed, our campaign has over 100 members of elected law enforcement who have already endorsed us, which is an overwhelming number compared to others. Indeed, we have more law enforcement support today than Bob McDonald had when he was running for Attorney General. So it is significant. They trust me, and those are issues that we're going to focus on. But we're going to focus on other things as well. Things we got earlier is expanding business opportunities in Virginia. Jobs is going to be a big part of that. One aspect of that is creating safe neighborhoods so companies will want to move to Virginia and moms and dads will want to stay. Enhancing the public safety surrounding our school system is very important. I mean, we should not forget about Virginia Tech. We come up on its second anniversary here in just a week. And April 16th is the day that all Virginians must remember what happened. I know I will remember it for the rest of my life. And in fact, our campaign will be standing down that day in remembrance of those young people who lost their lives there at Virginia Tech. So that's a big part of it. But we also want to be able to do things that enhance business opportunities. We talked about regulation. We talked about the cost of litigation. We talked about the permitting process. How can we streamline it, make it more effective? And then another thing I want to be able to focus on is protecting tax dollars. You know, the Attorney General doesn't vote to raise or lower taxes, but once they come in, he can play a very significant role in protecting them. The Medicaid Control Fraud Unit that Bob McDonald has been very effective in protecting tax dollars from fraud. And I want to be able to do that. We have all this stimulus money allegedly coming into Virginia for roads and bridges and schools, and we want to make sure that it goes for those purposes and then isn't lost through fraud and abuse. And so the Attorney General can play a role in that as well. So we're going to protect the public, we're going to enhance business, we're going to protect tax dollars, and those are some important areas we're going to focus on as Attorney General.
You're a long-term Virginian, but I imagine during the course of this campaign that you've seen parts of Virginia that you have never seen before. Can you tell me what's the most surprising thing that you've learned over the course of your campaign?
You know, I knew Virginia was a big state, but I didn't know it was big. Of course, I grew up here in Northern Virginia. I grew up in Fairfax County. I went to Robinson High School. And when you do that, fully the rest of Virginia, but I went to college, of course, out in Lexington, then went to law school in the eastern part of Williamsburg, and now served as U.S. Attorney in Roanoke all the way down to Lee County. And so I have gotten to see Virginia up close. It's a wonderful, fantastic state. Filled with wonderful, very gracious people of faith and family. And it makes me want to win this election even more to make sure that we can continue to protect them from these horror things. And when these things do happen, that we can step in and provide some semblance of justice. So I guess the biggest surprise is just how big it is. I'll tell you, when I'm in Williamsburg or Virginia Beach, and it's time for me to drive home, and I hit the GPS and it says 300 miles, I know I'm in for a long night. But it's been fantastic 10.5 months, and we're looking forward to the convention and then on to November.
Mr. Brownlee, thanks for your time today and answering the questions for our viewers. Good luck on the campaign trail.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
This is John Getty with the Loudoun Independent.